Hello dear viewers, my name is Dr. John Mohmad Pandit, Assistant Professor at the English Department, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Hyderabad. Today in this video lecture, I will deliberate on what's a reading comprehension. In this video lecture, you will come to know about what's a reading comprehension, and the second most important part is that what reading comprehension isn't, and the next at the end, we will see different types of reading comprehensions. Therefore, we will start with the first one. The first one is what is a reading comprehension. The first definition, it's given by Walter Kent, American psychologist. He says that a reading comprehension requires the construction of mental representation of the information in a text. Now, a reading comprehension, it's not all about reading. In fact, a reading comprehension, it's about both reading at the same time understanding the text. That's why we call it reading comprehension. It's a process in which we simultaneously read and understand the text or the written words. That's why we call it reading comprehension. And from this definition, we come to know that reading comprehension, it requires the construction of a mental representation of the information in a text. When I say that in the reading comprehension, actually the reader, he or she interacts with the text. And both the reader and the text informs each other. That's why we say it's a construction of mental representation. While reading, a reader, he constructs the mental representation of the information in a text. Therefore, from this definition, we come to know that the reading, it's not all about reading. In fact, it's interrelated with thinking. Or the two things, that is reading and thinking, they go simultaneously. While reading, a reader often interrogates the text. He often raises the questions on the text, or he informs the text through the process of thinking. That's why we call that the reading and the reading comprehension, it's not all about reading. It's not just reading the written words or written symbols. In fact, it's simultaneously reading as well as understanding the written words of a text. And when we talk about the understanding really actually deals with the thinking process. That's why we call that the reading, actually reading comprehension, it requires the construction of mental representation. It's a construction of mental representation of any information in a text. Now the second one, this is the most technical definition of reading comprehension. Here, more formally, reading comprehension has been defined as the process of simultaneously extracting and constructing meaning through interaction and involvement with written language. In a very technical manner, we say that the reading comprehension, It's a process in which a reader simultaneously do two things. The first is, while reading, the reader tries to extract and construct a meaning through interaction and involvement with the text. To make it more explicit, here I would like to define these points. The first one is the extract. This reading comprehension, it's simultaneously extracting and constructing of meaning, which means while reading a text, the reader, he simultaneously does two things. The first is he tries to extract meaning out of text, and at the same time he tries to construct meaning. He tries to construct a meaning out of the text. Now, the two things are important. One is the extracting, that means drawing out meaning out of the text, and the second point is the constructing, that means the building a meaning. And this extraction and the construction of meaning, it takes place when the reader engages or when the reader interacts with the text. That's very important. That's why I told you that reading is not just reading the written words. No. Here, the reader at first tries to extract and construct a meaning out of text. And how does the reader extract and construct a meaning out of text? When he or she gets involved, or when he or she gets engaged, or when he or she interacts with the text. It's a sort of interaction, a sort of conversation between the reader and the text, between the reader and the written words. That's why we often take reading comprehension just reading a text. It's not just reading a text. In fact, it is the interaction between the reader and the text. And in this interaction, the reader tries to extract and construct a meaning out of the text. And it was given by the Sinner, S.E. Sinner, in year 2002. Now, to make it more explicit, reading involves three interrelated elements. The first one is the reader, the second one is the text, and the third one is the activity or the actual reading process or the actual reading task. Therefore, for any reading process or for any reading comprehension, we need three things. The first one is the reader, one who reads the text. And the second one is the text, that means the written document or the actual words. And the third one is the process of reading, that means the activity or the reading task. And all these three things, that means the text, reader, and the reading task, all these three things, they are located into a broader socio-cultural context. Here we not only take into consideration these three things. That means the reader, the text, and the reading task. In fact, we take into consideration the very broader socio-cultural context. In which socio-cultural context a reader reads a text. That's why it's very important. The first thing is, we need a reader, and the second is the text, that means the written document, And the third one is the activity or the reading task. But all these three things, they are situated into a broader socio-cultural context. Here the socio-cultural context, it matters because in certain socio-cultural texts, the meaning gets changed. And to comprehend a text, a reader must be equipped with a host of abilities. As I told you, the first and most important thing is that reading involves three interrelated elements. The first is the reader, and the second is the text, and the third is the reading task. And all these three things, they are situated in a broader socio-cultural context. And in order to comprehend a text, a reader must be equipped with a host of abilities. Like the first one is the attention and memory. While reading, one need to be very attentive. One need to be conscious to every word of a text. That's why the attention is very important. And the second important point is the memory. That means the retention of the information, whatever we read from a text. Therefore, these two things are very important. And the first one is the attention, and the second one is the retention of the memory, or the retention of whatever you read from a text. And the second important point is the motivation. That means the reading goals and interests. If you are not motivated for reading, then it's all a futile exercise. Then it's all, for example, a physical exercise. One need to be motivated. One need to know the goals and interests of reading. These are the prerequisites for any reading comprehension. That means motivation, reading goals, and interests. If you are not reading in a text, then it's a mere physical process. And to make it mental process, to make it a psychological process, one need to have reading goals and interests. That's very important. And the next one is the knowledge, that is the domain knowledge or linguistic knowledge. Now, in order to comprehend a text, one need to have the subject knowledge. That's what we call the domain knowledge. One need to know the matter. One need to know the subject. One must have the knowledge of the subject. And the second one is the linguistic knowledge. That means the linguistic competence. One need to be competent when it comes to linguistics. For example, I'm reading a text, and that text it's written in, for example, Latin language. Surely I don't know the Latin language, and ultimately there will be no reading comprehension. In fact, there will be no reading at all. That's why we need the both domain knowledge, that is the subject knowledge, and the linguistic knowledge or linguistic competences in order to understand a text. Now, before we move further, here I would like to recapitulate this point. The reading text, it involves three things. The first one is like the reader. The second one is the actual text, and the third one is the reading task. And all these three things, they are situated in a broader context, which we call socio-cultural context. And in order to comprehend a text, one need to be equipped with a host of abilities like attention and memory. The second one is the motivation. That means we must know our reading goals and interests. And the third one is the knowledge, both domain knowledge, that is subject knowledge, and the linguistic knowledge. Now the next one. Reading comprehension is an important skill for navigating the textual world around us. Now, we are surrounded by a textual world. Everywhere we have texts, whether in the form of hard copy or whether in the form of a soft copy. In fact, we are surrounded by texts. And reading comprehension, it's important to understand those texts. In fact, reading comprehension is an important skill for navigating those texts, for deciphering those texts, or for decoding those texts. It's a dynamic process that involves making predictions, summarizing the main idea, questioning one's predictions, and clarifying unclear concepts. In reading comprehension, we often predict things. For example, I'm reading a text, and from the first paragraph, I come to know about the text, or I come to know about what is going next in the text, or what is coming next. And in this manner, I can predict the text. And this reading comprehension, we often do what we summarize the main ideas. As I told you that reading comprehension, it's not all about the reading. It is both reading as well as understanding the text. Yes, when we can understand a text, then and thereafter we can summarize the main ideas of the text, or often questioning one's predictions, or clarifying unclear concepts. These are the different steps or the process of reading comprehension. Reading comprehension, actually, it is the ability to read text, process it, and understand its meaning. To make it more simple, this reading comprehension, it is the ability to read the text. The first and the foremost thing is that one need to be able to read the text. That means he must have the linguistic competency, or he must have the knowledge of, for example, phonemes, phonetic symbols, etc. So as to understand the text. And the second part is the processing. After reading, we process that information, whatever we read from a text. We try to understand those words. We try to understand the text. We try to decipher, decode the text. And after understanding, we can summarize the text. We can make the predictions of the text. But the first and the foremost thing is that we need the ability to read the text and then process it and ultimately understand its meaning. For example, when a person reads a text, he engages in a complex area of cognitive processes. That means reading a text, it's not a physical process. In fact, it's a cognitive process. It's a mental process. Here our mind or our brain takes cajoles to understand a text. That's why we call it a complex process. And here, the reader is simultaneously using his awareness and understanding of phoneme. While reading a text, the reader he simultaneously uses his awareness and understanding of phonemes. That means the individual sounds, like here, like p, b, t, as in English. That means the smallest units, okay? The reader tries to find a connection between these phoneme sounds in order to frame these phoneme sounds into letters or the words. And then ultimately the reader combine these words in order to construct meaningful sentences. We often take this reading comprehension as a mere physical exercise, just reading a text. No, it's a process. It involves different steps. For example, the first and the foremost thing is that readers should be in a position to recognize the phonemes. And after recognizing these phonemes, the reader tries to assemble these phonemes in order to form words. And after that, the reader tries to combine these different words in order to construct meaningful sentences. Therefore, it's a process. It never occurs all of a sudden. It's a spontaneous process. It's a gradual process that follows a certain pattern. And to make it more explicit, we need to understand what a reading comprehension is not. The first one is reading comprehension is not about answering those little questions at the end of a story, chapter, or textbook section. We often consider reading comprehension just giving answer to the questions at the end of the chapter. Yes, of course, this is the one of the purpose of reading comprehension, but it's not the holistic meaning or the purpose of the reading comprehension. We often consider that the reading comprehension is just answering the literal questions which we find at the end of the text or at the end of the story or chapter. It's a great fallacy. And the second one is comprehension is not about spitting out facts and filling in the blanks. Again, we just reduce this reading comprehension to spitting out facts and filling in blanks. Of course, this is one of the purpose of reading comprehension, but it's not all about reading comprehension. And the next one is comprehension is about understanding, and reading is not merely about word color. Reading is about thinking. Now, we have the two words. The first one is the reading and the second one is the comprehension. And reading is not just about word color. It's not just about word color. And at the same time, reading is about thinking. And this reading comprehension here, two things simultaneously occur. One is the physical reading, at the same time, the second is the thinking or the understanding of whatever we read from the text. And here we will see some essentials of good reading. It's given by Michael Presley, an American educational psychologist. He puts forth certain essentials of good reading. The first one is are aware of why they are reading a text. A reader must be aware why he or she is reading a text. That means it must be a very purposeful reading. One need to know the purpose of reading. Because without purpose or without reading without purpose, it will be a mere physical exercise. Therefore, one need to know the purpose of reading. One need to know why he or she is reading a text. That's why there Michael Presley says one need to be aware why he or she is reading a text. And the second point is gain an overview of the text before reading. Before reading a text, we need to gain an overview of the text. We need to know about the overview of text, what the text is about. And the third one is make predictions about the upcoming text. Where in reading comprehension, we often make predictions. Yes, of course, these predictions, sometimes they will prove right and sometimes they will prove wrong, no matter. But we make predictions about the upcoming text in reading comprehension. And the next one is read selectively based on the overview. And from the overview, we can save time by reading selectively. And the next one is associate ideas in the text with what they already know. Here, the good reader, what he or she does, he often compare or he often interrelates the new information with whatever he or she knows. For example, I have some accumulated knowledge. And now I'm coming across a new document or new text. While reading a text, what I will do if I am a good reader, I will interrelate my accumulated knowledge or my accumulated information with the new text. That's why here we associate ideas in the text with what they already know. Note whether their predictions and expectations about the text content are being met. And here we see whether our predictions or expectations about the text content are being met. Revise their prior knowledge when compelling new ideas conflict with the prior knowledge encountered. Here, a good reader, the sign of a good reader is that if he or she finds that his or her accumulated knowledge, it doesn't correlate with the new knowledge, then it is good for the reader to shun that or to drop that accumulated knowledge and accept a new knowledge. That's why here we say revise their prior knowledge when compelling new ideas conflict with the prior knowledge or encounter. For example, as a reader, you have certain ideas, you have certain information, and while reading a new text, you come across new ideas. Then it's very good for you to revise your accumulated knowledge, revise your accumulated information, or drop that information that contradicts with facts, figures, or data. And the next one is figure out the meaning of unfamiliar vocabulary based on the context given. In reading comprehension, we never often consult a dictionary. Then, how we find the meaning of new words? We just find the context clues. That's why figure out the meaning of unfamiliar vocabulary. For example, in text, there are thousands and thousands of words. One is not supposed to know the meaning of all words. But if you find a word which you doesn't know, then you can decipher or you can come to know about the meaning of this word through the context clue. See the context. What is the context of the para? What is the context of the line? And from this context, you can deduce the meaning of that unfamiliar word. The next one is underline and reread and make notes and paraphrase to remember important points. Yes, we can in reading and comprehension. While reading a text, we can underline important words or we can reread and make notes and paraphrase to remember important points. Interpret the text. We can interpret the text after reading the text, after understanding the context, or after understanding the written words. evaluate its quality. Yes, we can in reading comprehension. If you're a good reader, you can evaluate the quality of the text. Review important points as they conclude reading. And a good reader, while concludes a reading, he reviews that written material. He sets forth his own opinions, or own opinions, of course, opinions on the text, which we call the review. Think about how ideas encountered in the text might be used in the future. Now, if you're a good reader, the sign of a good reader is that whenever a good reader encounters with the new ideas in a text, surely the reader, a good reader, he thinks how this new information or the new ideas can be recalled in the future, or can be utilized, or can be employed in the future situation. Now, the types of reading comprehension. We have mainly three types of reading comprehension. The first one is the literal comprehension, inferential comprehension, and the critical comprehension. We will take these three types of comprehension one by one. The first one is the literal comprehension. As the word literal suggests, here the reader looks at or searches for the superficial meaning of the text. Here the reader doesn't look for the latent meaning of the text or the hidden meaning of the text. That's why we call it literal comprehension. Here the literal comprehension, it involves what the author is actually saying. That means we see word-to-word meaning of the text. It's a superficial sort of reading, because here we see the literal meaning of the words. We don't look for the latent meaning of the text. That's why the reader needs to understand the ideas and information explicitly stated in the reading material. Now here, whatever the author has written, he has written it explicitly. That means there is only one meaning, that's the literal meaning or the superficial meaning or word-to-word meaning. There's no latent meaning, there's no hidden meaning which the reader need to decipher. That's why we call it the literal comprehension. Here the reader needs to understand the ideas and information explicitly stated in the reading material. Here the writer, he explicitly states the information. Here we don't need to go for example, the latent meaning of the text or the hidden meaning of the text. Some of this information is in the form of recognizing and recalling facts, identifying the main ideas, supporting details, categorizing, outlining, and summarizing. In literal comprehension, what we see, here we try to recognize. Here we try to recognize the known facts, or we just recall the facts, or we just identify the main ideas, or the supporting details, or the outline or summarizing. From the summarizing, we come to know about the main idea of the text. Or from the outline, we come to know about the main idea of the text. That's why we call it the literal comprehension. Here we try to understand the literal meaning of the words or the text. Here we try to understand the superficial meaning of the words, and here we employ different methods in order to understand the literal meaning of the text. For example, we try to identify the main ideas or the supporting details, or we outlining or summarizing. And the literal comprehension, the reader is also locating information using context clues to supply meaning. following specific directions, following a sequence, identifying stated conclusions, and identifying explicitly stated relationship and organizational pattern. Here, in this literal comprehension, the reader actually looks for context clues so as to understand the main idea of the text. Or, for example, he follow a sequence, or he, for example, follow or look for uh, identifying stated conclusion. If there are stated conclusion, that means author has made certain things explicit. We simply go to that information. We simply go to that stated conclusions in order to understand the text, and identifying explicitly stated relation. For example, in a text, there are two things, and author tries to show the relation of the two things, and we try to identify this relation when author explicitly states that relation in any line or in few words. Little comprehension here, it questions, for example, how, what, who, when, where. For example, some questions and activities may include what words state the main idea of the story. For example, here, as I told you, we see the context clues, or we look for the words that give us the gist or that give us the idea of the whole text. That's why we often pose questions like, what words state the main idea of the story? Or, how does the author summarize what he is saying? Or here, outlining the first pair of the story. What happened first, second, and the last? How are these things alike? How are they different? That's why here, in the literal comprehension, we simply look for the literal meaning of the words or the sentences. Here we don't go to the deeper level, or we don't try to find the latent meaning of the text. And the second one is inferential comprehension. Inferential comprehension involves how author conveys. It's the ability to process written information and understanding the underlying meaning of the text. Now, this inferential comprehension, here the reader not only deciphers the literal meaning of the words, in fact, he looks for the deeper meaning of the text. That means the latent meaning of the text, or you can say the underlying meaning of the text. Or he looks for something which is not explicitly stated by the text, stated by the author. Here, what does the author value? For example, we often pose the questions like, what does the author value? Or what is the theme of the text? Therefore, in order to understand the theme of the text, we need to understand the latent meaning of the text. We need to understand the theme which author has not explicitly stated. That's why, or what effect does character or event have on the story? This information is then used to infer or determine deeper meaning that's not explicitly stated. That's why here we look for the deeper meaning. We try to infer the information, or the information, whatever we get from the text, we then use to infer or determine the deeper meaning that is not explicitly stated by the author. Now here, this inferential comprehension, what we do, we look for the deeper meaning. We try to infer the meaning. We try to relate whatever we read. We try to relate it with the other text or with our accumulated knowledge of on the subject. Here, the reader tries to decipher or tries to look for the deeper meaning of the text or the latent meaning of the text, or you can say the hidden meaning of the text, which has not been explicitly stated by the author. And inferential comprehension requires a reader to, for example, combine ideas. Here we combine different ideas so as to form our own conclusion. I read between the lines. Here we read the text thoroughly. That means word by word, line by line. Interpret figurative language. If there is a figurative language, for example, if there's a certain poetic device or techniques in the text, we try to decipher that figures of speech. For example, if there's a metaphor or simile or personification or hyperbole in a text, we try to decipher the meaning of those metaphors, similes, personification, so as to understand the whole text, so as to get the holistic understanding of the text. Drawing conclusions. Here we draw conclusions after understanding the text or predicting outcomes. We see the outcomes of our prediction, determining the mood. We see the moods, judging the author's point of view. Here again, we see we test like the author's viewpoint. We judge the author's viewpoint. And the next one is the critical comprehension. This critical comprehension concerns itself with why the author says what he or she says. Here the important point is why. In the critical comprehension, we read a text, we try to understand a text critically. We often pose question why. If the author has stated this thing, why has he or she stated this thing? That means we critically evaluate the text, we critically read the text. This high level of comprehension requires the reader to use some external criteria from his or her own experience in order to evaluate the quality, value of writing, the author's reasoning, simplification and generalization tone mood of the author. And this type of reading, this critical comprehension, it's considered as high level of comprehension. Here the reader use some external criteria from his her own experience in order to evaluate the quality of text, in order to evaluate the value of text, in order to evaluate the tone, the mood of the author. Now, in the critical, what we do in critical comprehension, actually, we read the text critically. We often pose question why. It reminds me of Karl Marx statement that is, question everything. Here again, we question everything. We question every idea as propounded by the author. That's why what we do here, we compare the accumulated knowledge with the text we are reading right now. Here we reason with the text. In critical comprehension, there is a conversation between the reader and the text. And in this conversation or interaction, the reader often poses questions so as to frame his learned conclusions. That's why here the reasoning takes place. Here we see, try to see the tone, the mood, or the quality, or the values of the writing. And critical comprehension involves, could this possibly happen? If we are reading a text and the critical comprehension, what we pose a question, could this possibly happen? Whatever the author has written, whether it is possible or not, is this argument logical? Whatever the argument author has put in a text, We pose question to that argument, and our question is like, is this argument logical? Is it really logical? Does the argument follow the logic or the reason? And the next one is, what alternatives are there? Here we don't rely on the author's text. Here we look for the alternatives. We look for the other viewpoints. And then we critically compare and evaluate the author's viewpoints and others' viewpoints. That's why here we look for the alternatives. We read or we evaluate or we critically analyze different viewpoints. And in order to find an alternative. Is this a fact or an opinion? In critical reading, what we do while reading a text, we see whether the point or whether it's a fact or opinion of the author. We see that we differentiate, we compartmentalize facts from opinions. Do you agree or disagree with the author? In critical reading, what we do, we put forth our opinion, or we state whether we agree or disagree with the author. That's why here we critically evaluate everything. We don't take readily whatever author has said or whatever the text has said. In fact, we relate the text with our accumulated knowledge or with other texts so as to form an informed opinion. And the next one is, what is the best solution to this problem? And in critical comprehension, we look for the solutions. We try to find out the solutions. This was all about reading comprehensions, essentials of reading comprehensions, and different types of reading comprehension. These are the different references. You can consult these references for further reading. Now we will meet in next video with next topic. Till then, goodbye.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.